Hello and welcome to Cloudforest Vibes. My name's Bobby, and this is how I grow orchids and carnivorous plants. Hello and welcome to Cloudforest Vibes. I was having a look around in the greenhouse earlier today when I was doing some watering, and I noticed a bunch of progress on my Masdevallias, my Draculas, my Restrepias, and I figured I'd pull all those out. We can have a little bit of a tour, I guess you can say, and I'm going to discuss each one of them, show you guys how they're doing, and have a chat about a little bit of my care tips at least. I grow in a really humid grow tent. I don't have issues mounting a lot of plants that some people would otherwise find a nightmare. I do have issues growing things in pots, even Masdevallias and Draculas. So this is my little chat about really cool, really moist, really shady growers, and how I take care of them, how I try to keep mine alive. I'm doing pretty well so far, knock on wood. I've only killed a handful of Masdevallias at this point, but I do have some really great progress, and I'm really eager to show you guys. So here we go. I'm going to go ahead and pull stuff out in the tank first, actually. We're going to talk about the little ones, and then we're going to circle back, and we'll have a look in here at the end, and we'll look at everything that I grow in here as well and see how it's doing. So thanks for joining. Here's my Masdevallia and Dracula chat, and I hope you guys enjoy. So we're back. I lied. I think we're going to do this by genus. So what I've done is I've pulled out all my Masdevallias, the ones from the tank and the tent. We'll have a look at them first, and then we'll go through the other two genus and do it like that. I think that'll be better. So first and foremost, Masdevallias, they are very tricky. It's true what people say, but you really shouldn't be scared of them. The most important thing that I've been able to take away from my limited knowledge of growing these things is that yes, they do want to stay moist, but they do not want to be soggy. They do not want to be overly moist. So the Masdevallia that I've had the longest, which is the one we'll start with, is this. This is Masdevallia Florabunda. I grow this in a basket with large bark and some sphagnum moss, and it hangs just like this. I've had this plant for about 2 years. It is the only one of my original Masdevallias that has survived my abuse, and it does grow well. It flowered for me this year in a beautiful spectacle, and I will throw pictures up of that because this is a really good one, and I'm proud of it. This is the only one that I've managed to really keep alive and do well with long term. I grow it mounted in this little basket hanging, and as you see, it does have roots. I don't know if you can see that or not. I'm probably off camera. I grow it in this basket hanging. It does have roots. It's doing well. It's probably going to have to come out of here in the spring because I'm going to have to freshen up the media, but for now it stays. So I may contemplate growing this thing mounted again, but I don't know. It came to me mounted from Andy when I got it. It was doing just fine, and then I messed it up. I mounted it wrong. I crowded the base with sphagnum moss, and let me tell you, that is one of the quickest ways that you can tank, I mean absolutely tank, a Masdevallia. If you crowd the base, if you keep the basal rosette of the actual plant too moist or smothered in moss or any media, anything like that, they will rot and they will die. The roots, if you keep them too wet, they will rot and they will die. You'll notice immediately that most of my Masdevallia orchids grow mounted. I do not have any success with these plants in pots. Absolutely no success. The roots get smothered and they die, and then the plant rots and it dies. So the only other one I have in a mesh basket is the Masdevallia Garciae. I have this propped up with a couple bamboo skewers that are actually moldy. I'm going to have to spray those, but I do have the bamboo skewers in just to hold the plant upright until the new growths, which it is forming, start to produce roots, and it anchors the plant down in. Then I will remove them and it can be a freestanding plant. I do have a wire on it. My hopes are that I can hang it just like that, probably side by side, and I can have another one hanging in a mesh pot because it really does seem to do well like that. The media I have in here is large bark with just a touch of chopped sphagnum moss and perlite and charcoal. It's a nice airy mix, and it has the little touch of sphagnum moss which helps retain moisture even though it is large bark. The reason I got to using large bark in my Masdevallia and Dracula pots is because of the air gaps that it provides. Again, moist but airy. That is the secret to these plants. So however you can simulate that, in my environment, that's the only way I could do it, was with large bark. So it made sense at the time, and again, the proof is with this one. It really does work. If you have trouble keeping your pots airy enough, you might have to water a little bit more, but large bark really is a key for me in keeping these plants really happy at the roots. So getting on to my next key is mounting. This is one of my newer Masdevallias. This is Masdevallia exquisita. I got this from Andy's not too long ago, and it's pushing on, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 new growths, and it's doing well. It never missed a beat. It lost one growth. I had it a little bit crowded with the moss here, and it did rot. I'm sorry, on this side, and it did rot one. That actually could probably come off, but I'll do that later. However, it's doing well. I keep it in a shady spot right down next to my Restrepia subote, and it's happy. It's underneath the window. It gets absolutely no direct light at all, but it gets some very bright indirect light, which is what these plants really do love. It came in spike, and it did not flourish. The spike blasted. I think it was too warm in transit or too warm in my greenhouse at the time, but I do know that this is a flowering size Masdevallia, so I will be looking very soon in this upcoming season for these new growths to throw flowers. That'll be great. So those are actually all 3 of the Masdevallias that I grow in my tent. I only grow 3 in the tent at this time. I would love to have more in there, but I'm still trying to figure them out. So these are kind of my 2 experimental ones, and they are doing well. Again, they're doing really well, so I'm thankful for that. Cooler weather's coming, so that can only be more promising for these. They are intermediate growers. They're a little bit warmth tolerant for Masdevallias, but I'm just hoping they flourish as well as this one's doing. So I'm gonna get in a little bit closer here because the rest of them are miniatures, so forgive me a moment while I adjust. Now, these 4 Masdevallias are the 4 that I grow inside my orchidarium in the tank. These are both Winlandiana. This is just a smaller division. I mounted separately. It didn't fit as well on this. I didn't want to crowd everything, so I put it over there. This is my sad, but still somehow hanging in there, Masdevallia patriciana. And this is actually a division of Masdevallia Garciae, the one that you saw above potted, that I decided to mount with live moss and throw in the orchidarium. All 4 of these get the same conditions. They get low to mid 70 highs, and they get near 60-degree lows when the conditions allow for me. Right now they're getting about mid 60s at night. They get high humidity. In my tank they get 89 to 91% humidity at all times. The first thing you're going to notice different, I'm sure, is this. The Masdevallia Garciae up in the pot that grows in my tank, that grows in the tent, is actually struggling to put on roots. The growth is very slow comparatively to this one, and honest to God, the color is completely night and day. The green here, it grows really quickly, and it's chucking out new roots like it's going out of style. So the high humidity absolutely makes a huge world of difference, especially when you're dealing with rootless Masdevallias or when you're trying to rescue a Masdevallia. If you have any way of bumping up your humidity or making some sort of enclosure or something to allow for 89-90% humidity while you're nursing them back to health, this is proof right here that it actually absolutely does work. The patriciana as well came to me. It came in a heat wave, it had a really nice bush. It was a really nice plant when I first got it, and then it started just dropping, dumping leaves. It got hot. It's an intermediate to cool, or cool to intermediate grower, and it finally had these 2 leaves on it. I thought it was done for, but it ceased. It kind of just stalled, and lo and behold, it's got 4 new growths coming out of the bottom section. So it's pushing on. I think it's going to be a while before we're out of the woods, but again, keeping it in the high humidity. I'm letting this gently dry out in between waterings, not completely dry, nothing crispy, but spongy dry, just a gentle dryness before I water it again. And I've elevated the bottom of this plant, the base, so it's just the roots going down into this. And that is key. Again, do not crowd the base of these plants. If this gets wet right now and stays wet for too long, I can guarantee you it would kill the rest of the little bit of life that is left in that plant. Moving on to the Masdevallia Winlandiana. I got this from Tarzan. I threw it on a mount as well and threw it in the orchidarium, and I don't know if you can see that or not, but 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. It's got 7 new growths just on that one alone, and this is pushed on 3 already, and it's got several more coming. They're both chucking out roots. They are happy as a clam. So I'm doing really well so far with the Masdevallias I'm growing in the tank. Even this one, I consider this a success, and we'll just have to keep checking in. I cannot wait to see some of these things bloom. I think the season is coming for some of them. I remember when I had the Winlandiana before I killed it. This is round 2 with Winlandiana, but the first one I got I killed, and I do believe it flowered in the winter time, so we should have some blooms coming up down the road. That is my Masdevallias. I'm going to go ahead and get these guys all put away, and I'm going to grab out the Restrepias. Be right back. Okay, so we're back again with the Restrepias. I have 5 different species here that I grow currently. This is my newest one, and my smallest one, and actually one that doesn't live in the tank. This is Restrepia subote. I got this recently, again from Tarzan. And this is one of your more warmth tolerant species. I'm really excited to be able to keep this in my tank. I'm sorry, in my tent and not the tank. And yeah, it's doing really well so far. I got it out of the pot. I threw it on a mount just with some zombie moss. I fully anticipate that moss to come back to life on its own. Being kept wet as it's going to be kept, that's usually when it happens. So I have Restrepia contorta. I have Restrepia muscifera, I have Restrepia falkenbergii, and I have another newer acquisition. This is Restrepia chameleon. All of my Restrepias I grow mounted. I do find it easiest, at least for me in my environment, to keep them moist while they're mounted, and to monitor the root growth, and to make sure that you're not crowding the rhizome and making sure the base of the plant doesn't stay too moist. It's very important, again, that these plants never dry out. They are a moist-loving plant. They come from cloud forests. They love the highest humidity that you can imagine. I mean, these plants are more than happy in 95% humidity. I grow them mostly at 90 in the tank, but they get about 85 or so in the tent whenever they do go in there. I've had issues blooming some of them. My contortas never bloomed for me. Again, I've only had these 2 for a few months, but I have bloomed the other 2. So this one I think is a temperature related issue, so I'm strongly debating in the winter time when it's cooler in my tent, removing this from the tank, actually all of them, and putting them in the tent and letting them live in there where they're going to get cooler temperatures, and see if that affects the blooming. I think it'll help. I hope it'll help, and we'll go from there. But this is another one. I grow them virtually under the identical care as I do Masdevallias or Draculas. They get more waterings with clean water than they get with feed. They get a very low feed level. I water all the plants that we're looking at today at about 60 to 80 parts per million of MSU feed. I do give minute amounts of CalMag, CalMax, Cal nitrate in the growing season, but it's really far spaced out. Again, maybe once every week, once every 2 weeks, and lots and lots and lots of clean water flushes. I do regularly give them CalMag at about 30 parts per million or so during the week, maybe once or twice, but Again, these plants get much more clean water than they do any feed of any kind, and they do just fine with that. Again, the most important thing with these plants is the humidity level, making sure they never dry out. And again, they do not like sun. They are really shady growers, most of them. They can handle some morning sunlight, but that is it. Anything past an hour or two of early morning sun and you're probably going to cook these plants and kill them. So that's my Restrepias. They are awesome, and I do have one in bloom right now. So my Musifera right here has a flower out, and it's got another one here coming. So we're going to have 2 flowers on this thing in the next couple days for the first time. So I'll check back in with a picture or something, but it is a really nice Restrepia. Lovely blooms, spotted red velvety blooms, and yeah, awesome. So those are my Restrepias. That's how I care for them. Again, don't be afraid to grow them mounted. Just make sure that you're going to be able to put in the workload of keeping them moist, or you have an environment that you can boost the humidity up and they will stay moist longer. The ones that live in the tent, this one lived there for quite a while, but this one now, I mean, this little mount takes 3 days to get what I would call gently dry. My humidity level is the thing that helps me with that. So don't just think that you can't grow them because they're fussy, they need humidity, this, that, and the other. There are ways around that. You can always supplement things or find a way to create a microclimate or a microenvironment for plants like this. Alright, so on to the Draculas. Now, here we have my personal favorite of the lot. We have my 3 Draculas. This is Dracula gasculliana, this is Dracula barrowii, and this here is my Dracula Lotex. I grow this one in the tank, and the other 2 I grow in the tent. If you followed my Dracula saga at all, my acquisition of them, they are new plants to me. This is my first year growing them. It started with this one, it was a gift. Then I bought this one and this one separately as well, just to increase my collection. And I was growing these in baskets with a similar mix like I grow my Masdevallia orchids in. The biggest change you'll probably notice is they're no longer in baskets, clearly. About a week ago, I got fed up. I was losing new growths. I had several more new growths on this one, and they were rotting. They would get to a certain size, they would turn yellow, and they would fall off. I had the same thing start happening on this plant here. The growths would come out, they would get a yellow tinge to them, and sure enough, a day or 2 later, they were brown and I was ripping them out. So, what happened? Again, everyone talks about how moist these plants need to stay at all times, so I got lured in the trap and I was keeping these plants far too moist. I had a lot more sphagnum moss broken up in their pots than I do use with the Masdevallia orchids. The biggest issue that was arising from that was I was crowding the base of these plants, and when the new growths would push out, they'd get to about this size and they would get water down in this first bract and they would just melt away, they would rot. These growths themselves were actually submerged almost in the sphagnum moss. There was only a tip when I found them, and as you can see, they start way down here. So I had this plant buried way too deep. It's actually 2 plants now. I rotted the rhizome in between. This thing here, same thing. The middle of this plant was starting to rot. It was starting to go. I did manage to save the new growths, and it's pushing on more, but both of these plants really had a terrible root system. I annihilated the roots on both of these plants. They didn't have great root systems to begin with, to be fair, but they didn't have what I was expecting. This has put on some nice new root growth. We did manage to save some, but these both need a lot of help. So I've mounted them with a little bit of the red sphagnum moss and some of the forest moss as well, tucked in, and I really like the look of that. It's really going well on here so far, but that's the next topic. And yeah, I'm growing them moist. They grow right down on my bottom shelf. They get bright indirect light, but it's filtered through plants, and then they get pretty bright light from my artificial light on the low light side, because I do have two sides. I have a much more powerful light over one side, and then the Spanish moss curtain, which kind of separates that light from plants like this that really don't want that high intensity LED light. So that leaves us with our final Dracula here, and possibly my favorite one in my collection, this Dracula Lotex. And we're actually going to go ahead, I'm going to get this down, and we're going to take a closer look at it because I have some really awesome news. So we're down here. This is our Dracula Lotex that we got from Tarzan. We mounted it with live moss. This is live sphagnum moss and the live forest moss mixed together, and I think it just looks awesome. This is my favorite Dracula, mainly for that reason. The big news is, I don't know if you can see it or not. We're going to have to try to zoom in. Lynn Smith, she's already spotted it. But up here, right above my finger there, coming out of this growth and tucked right behind this growth right here, I have what I believe to be my first two spikes coming on this plant. So I hope you can see it. This is the first one here, and then there's another one creeping out back in this area here. So my first two spikes are coming on Dracula Lotex, and that is absolutely huge news. I am so thrilled. I cannot wait to see this. Again, the Dracula genus is absolutely one of my favorite genus of orchids. The flowers are just breathtaking. I wish I could grow more of them, and I'm taking steps to try to enable myself to be able to do that in the near future, but that's another surprise for another day. So these are my Draculas. The one in a tank, again, gets the same conditions as everything else in the tank. Low to mid 70s during the day as a high. Sometimes it gets up a little bit higher when the room gets toasty, but never ever more than 77 or 78 degrees. That would be way too hot. And then down to about 60 degrees at night in the winter time. The tent gets a little bit cooler. The larger Draculas, we go back and get them all in shot again. The larger Draculas that reside in a tent, they go down to high 50s, around 56, 57, mid to high 50s, and they get a high, believe it or not, of around at 80 degrees in the summer. So they stay shady, they stay in front of a computer fan at a safe distance so it's not hurting them, and they do stay very moist. So far so good. Most of the growths that you see on here are mine. The older leaves have died off at this point, but I am just hoping that this keeps going on in the right direction now that we have them both mounted, and see if they can do better. I think they look a lot better. I absolutely love the way that the mounted Draculas look, and especially when they flower and the spikes are coming through the moss and everything. I just think it's awesome. So hopefully they do well long term. Again, just like the Masdevallias, you do not want to crowd the base of these plants at all. You want to give them some room to breathe, room to chuck out their new growths unimpeded, so they're not getting smothered. Otherwise, again, if they get moisture down in this region of the new growth too often, they will rot, they will die. If you crowd the base of the plant, it will rot, it will die. And if you keep the roots, too wet, just like I have with these plants growing in the pots with too much moss, they will rot, and again, they will die. That is the theme of today, I guess. Anybody who's grown enough Masdevallias and Draculas, they will probably agree that the theme is kind of, you gotta kill a couple, unless you're lucky, but you will kill some to figure out how to grow them for sure. It's gonna differ in your environment. This is just how I grow them again, and I'm just hoping I can help you guys out and help you learn from some of my mistakes and how to hopefully add some of these awesome plants into your collection. So that's my video for the day. I'm going to get all these put back. I do not like keeping them out too long in their low humidity of the house, so I'm going to put them away. And again, I hope you enjoyed my video. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, happy growing.